Hi guys, thanks for stopping by my channel. So today's video is going to be kind of a part 2 to my Halloween color and chat series that I've been doing for the month of October. And today we're going to be coloring this image from Molly Harrison's Etsy shop. I picked this one up. I think she's having a sale at the moment. I got her for, I think, $1.49, marked down from $1.99, I think. So I thought it would be a cute one to do for this topic we're going to be talking about today. So our topic today is going to be the origins or the history of the bedsheet ghost. When I originally thought of this topic, I actually wrote it up first, and then when I recorded it, I was like, oh no. I didn't realize when I was writing it out so many S sounds in this story. I do have somewhat of a speech impediment left over from childhood. I think I've talked about this before, but I have this kind of speech fluency problem. I didn't really even realize I still had it until I started doing this channel where I could actually hear myself talk. I do get some kind of unsolicited comments about it. So when I realized all of these S's in the story, I was a little bit regretful of the topic I picked, but it's a pretty interesting one. So I tried my best. It took me a little bit longer to record than usual. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to be using to color this page. Probably some alcohol markers. Just remember, this is purely for entertainment purposes and most likely is not encompassing the whole entire picture of the origins of the bedsheet ghost. I just picked out a few points of interest that I thought were interesting and made a good story for you guys. So let's get into it. Is there any Halloween costume more cliched than the bedsheet ghost? The easiest of which can be fashioned with nothing but white linens and scissors for eye holes. But have you ever wondered where this tradition came from and how it has evolved over time? This specific image of ghosts as white sheets has been ingrained in our culture for centuries, and up until fairly recently, it was considered genuinely terrifying. The root of it lies in the fact that up until the 19th century, the dead were almost always wrapped in burial shrouds, rather than placed in coffins. In poorer families, the recently deceased were simply wrapped up in the sheet from their deathbed and secured inside by a knot tied to either end. In the 1300s, ghosts were often depicted as skeletons draped in their shrouds. By the 1400s, people reporting supernatural phenomena almost always described apparitions as being clad in their death shrouds. This depiction was by then so widely accepted that an entire subset of English thieves began donning white sheets and pretending to be ghosts. These undead disguises had the dual benefit of hiding the thieves' true appearance, while also scaring their targets into handing over money. Even after multiple ghost impersonators were exposed by the authorities over many years, the public continued to believe that unhappy spirits roamed the earth clad in their burial shrouds. Nonetheless, even though this was one image of a ghost that existed at the time, it was far from the most iconic one. In plays of the 15th and 16th centuries, ghosts were most often portrayed dressed in armor, not covered in shrouds. In the original production of Shakespeare's Hamlet, it is highly probable that the ghost of Hamlet's father would have been portrayed dressed in armor. If this is the case, then how did the image of the shrouded ghost become the most iconic one? One of the most famous of all reported apparitions in England during the early 19th century was the so-called Hammersmith ghost. In 1804, London, England, a bricklayer named Thomas Millwood was mistaken for a ghost and shot and killed by a man named Francis Smith. Smith had seen Millwood's pristine white work uniform, complete with white apron, and assumed he was a ghost. Various locals in the district had been claiming that they were attacked by the ghost of a man who had been buried in the Hammersmith churchyard the previous year. Some of those who claimed to have seen the ghost described it as extraordinarily tall and wrapped in a white shroud. Fear of the supposed ghost gripped the whole city. London did not have an organized police force at the time, so ordinary people organized hunts to go look for the ghost. Francis Smith, a customs officer, mistook Thomas Millwood for the ghost he was lying in wait for. Smith, who had grown frustrated at the lack of success of the neighborhood watch groups, went out alone on that dark evening of January 3rd, patrolling Black Lion Lane at the same time that the unfortunate Millwood was walking through. Smith stated that he called twice to the figure, but did not get a response, and the figure continued to proceed toward him, causing him so much fear that he opened fire. Once he discovered that he had shot a person, he ran for help and was reportedly upset but compliant with the police when he was arrested. This accidental shooting led to a trial that garnered much publicity. Because of the fact that Smith had mistaken Millwood for the ghost on account of his white clothing, the description of the Hammersmith ghost as a tall figure wrapped in a white shroud quickly became the canonical one. At the murder trial, Millwood's wife said her husband had been mistaken as a ghost by 3 other people before the shooting, and that she had asked him to start wearing an overcoat to no avail. Smith had numerous character witnesses who stated that he was gentle and mild-mannered, and testified in his defense that he went out that evening with good intentions and did not intend to murder any man. He stated that he was so agitated at the time that he did not know what he did. Smith was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death, which at the time meant he would be hanged and his body would be sent to a medical college to be dissected. There was a significant amount of public sympathy for the defendant at the time, and when the sentence was passed, the Newgate Calendar reported that he, quote, commanded the sympathy of every spectator in the courtroom. The public interest in the case was so great that the Lord Chief Baron informed the jury after they returned their verdict that he would immediately report the case to the Crown, and did this so quickly that the Crown returned a command of respite during pleasure before 7 o'clock that evening. In a little over 3 weeks, Smith received a pardon from the Crown with the condition that he be sentenced to 1 year of hard labor. Ultimately, it was discovered that a Hammersmith shoemaker named John Graham admitted that he had started the whole story of the Hammersmith ghost as a hoax to scare people. Graham claimed he had become the ghost and scared villagers to get revenge on his apprentices after they told his children scary ghost stories. The memory of the Hammersmith ghost lived on, and ironically, about 2 decades later, people began telling stories of how the vengeful spirit of Thomas Millwood supposedly haunted the area of Hammersmith where he had been shot and killed. Unfortunately, Millwood's tragic death by no means shifted the general public's idea about besheeted ghosts. In 1888, one Missouri newspaper conducted a poll of its readers asking if they believed in spirits. A reader wrote in to say that he had seen 2 ghosts in his life. One of them, he claimed, was a large white object with long horns that he would have shot if he had his pistol with him. The notorious case of the Hammersmith ghost probably played a significant role in popularizing the belief that ghosts were often seen dressed in white funeral shrouds throughout the English-speaking world. The theater seems to have been influenced as well. In English and American plays produced during the 19th century, ghosts were often portrayed dressed in billowy white shrouds, just like the Hammersmith ghost. The final step in the transition from shrouds to bedsheets seems to have occurred with the advent of Halloween costumes and trick-or-treating in the early 20th century. In those early days of Halloween, there were no fancy, pre-made store-bought costumes, so children who wanted to dress up had to make their own costumes. Children who wanted to go as ghosts found they could use white bedsheets to imitate the appearance of a shrouded ghostly figure. The problem arose, however, that if they just threw on a bedsheet over their heads, they couldn't see where they were going, so children began to cut eye holes in their imitation shrouds. Eventually, after years of children wearing white bedsheets as Halloween costumes, people all forgot that the bedsheet was supposed to represent a burial shroud, and they came to think of ghosts as wearing actual bedsheets. Thus, the modern bedsheet ghost was born. By 1969, Scooby-Doo and the gang had begun exposing ghosts and ghouls as human frauds, and of course the opening credits of that show featured a bedsheet ghost. Scooby-Doo's tone fit the times. There was an overwhelming sense that the bedsheet ghost, along with other superstitions, should be relegated to the realms of old-fashioned tomfoolery. On November 8, 1964, North Carolina's News and Observer declared, "Styles in ghosting are changing." Dwindling into obscurity are the old-fashioned, groaning, flapping bedsheet ghosts and the simple white objects that jump out of dark places. These are fading along with simple haunted houses, graveyard ghosts, and headless horsemen. These days, bedsheet ghosts are more likely to be found cutely adorning clothes, decorations, and candles on Etsy than they are giving anyone an actual fright. But at this time of year, it's worth remembering who the bedsheet ghosts once were and who they represented. After all, you never know when the scary ones might come back. All right, you guys, so we're all done coloring this page, and we finished up our story about the bedsheet ghosts origins. I was curious, have you guys ever heard of the Hammersmith ghost before? I had never heard of it before. I am very into true crimes and mysteries and that sort of thing. Seems like this was a pretty popular happening, especially if it was kind of the nexus of where we get the idea of what a ghost looks like, a bedsheet ghost trope. So let me know if you have heard of that story before. It kind of reminded me a little bit of a few years ago when there was that big clown scare going on. I know it was before the pandemic, sometime before the pandemic happened. I think it actually started in the UK or London, just like this story as well. Everyone was on the lookout for creepy clowns for a while. So I just mainly did alcohol markers. I used some watercolor paints. This is my Mylang watercolor set. This is the same makers as the Paul Rubens paints, just I think just a little bit lesser quality pigments, I think is what they say. You can tell it's a big mess. I do use it a lot. I have a lot of watercolor paints sets and everything, and this one I use a lot. It's one of my favorites to use. And I used some of the Mungio chalk pastels, a little bit in the back just to fill it in the whiteness on the back. And I did a frame with some washi tape. Thought it matched almost perfectly with the background of the page. This little cat didn't turn out too well, unfortunately. He looks a little bit almost like a dog or a pig, maybe even. I don't know. But other than that, I'm happy with how she turned out. I do want to do at least one more color and chat before this month is over. I do like to do things in threes, so I will be working on another one. Maybe it'll be out by the end of this week or beginning of next week. So stay tuned for that. If you have any suggestions for me, any kind of story you want to hear or you're interested in, let me know. I'll do some research and see if it's a good one for one of the Halloween pages I have to color. So I hope you guys all have a really great rest of your day. Happy coloring, and I'll see you guys next time.